In this video, I will show you how to build a computer from start to finish. These are the categories of today's video. You can click on a category and jump straight to it, or you can watch the whole video. Now, the first thing I had to consider when building a computer was the case. I bought a case that was big enough to house my graphics card. Inside the case, there's also instructions on where to mount your motherboard. The case also came with another box that had mounting brackets for drives. Make sure the case you buy supports your motherboard, and make sure you wear an anti-static wrist guard when you open your motherboard. Also make sure that your motherboard supports the CPU that you buy. This is an LGA 1366 socket. Notice there's a triangle down here and also a load lever that you have to push down and then move out of the way, and you can flip the load plate up with your finger. Next, remove this PNP cap and save it for later in case you have to return your motherboard. This was the first time I've dealt with this newer socket, and I was amazed at how small everything was. In fact, it was so amazing I decided to touch it with my finger because I wanted to feel how fine the metal was. And that turned out to be a really bad idea because I touched it, noticed it looked a little bit different than when I originally started, and I ended up bending one of the pins that you see. Do it yourself means fix it yourself, and I used a needle to fix the bent pin. Let's start over. Face the motherboard towards you and don't remove the PNP cap until you're ready to insert the CPU. Once you have the CPU all ready to go ahead and remove the cap and save it for later. And then you want to place the CPU in the socket. You'll notice there's a CPU notch on either side, and there's also an alignment key. That's the triangle there, and it just fits in only one way. Once you're ready, place the load plate back down, and then the load lever will have some resistance, but if you push it hard enough, you can get it to latch back into place. That is how the landing grid array 1366 socket installation works, and this is an Intel i7 CPU. Next, you need to secure your motherboard into your case. Make sure to remove the mounting instructions first and secure it well. The CPU will come with a stock cooler, but if you want to do anything extreme like overclocking, you're going to need something a little more powerful. This particular CPU cooler comes with a bunch of brackets and then the main unit. You have to install the correct mounting brackets for your motherboard. Since I'm using an Intel style motherboard, I mount the Intel brackets on here. This is the back plate that actually goes on the other side of the motherboard and helps secure the CPU cooler in. This is the side that hits the CPU cooler. Notice how this bracket fits nicely onto the main unit. Next, I placed some thermal compound in the center of the CPU to help with the cooling. I also found it easiest to plug in my 12-volt power cord to the motherboard and also the CPU fan before I drop in this huge CPU cooler and mount it from the back side. And that's how I installed the CPU cooler, which goes through the motherboard and is secured from the rear. It also came with a variable resistor, so you can control the CPU cooler manually if you desire. And this variable resistor is secured in an expansion slot, and you can control it from the rear of your case. It's important to buy a power supply unit with enough wattage to run your equipment. I bought an 850 watt unit that's considered a modular unit because you only need to plug in the cables for the things that you must power. I already plugged in the 8-pin 12-volt connector. Now it's time to plug in the 24-pin connector. The next thing I did was plug in all the case connectors, and this was easy to do with my ASUS motherboard because it came with this Q connector, which allowed me to plug in all the reset, power switch, and LEDs for the hard drive into one unit, and the speaker, and then I can plug that unit directly into the motherboard, as you see there on the right. My case came with two front panel audio connectors. I used the one on the right, which is HD audio, which is a newer system, and it plugs in here on the left. There were also 3 case fans that are always on when the computer is on, and I just needed to run power to them. Make sure your motherboard supports the type of memory you want to buy. It most likely will. And then read your motherboard instructions to figure out what slots to put your memory in. If you have 3 DIMMs, it'll probably just go in the first 3 slots that are in blue, like I'm showing you here. Next is the drives that need to be installed. Now the case that I bought boasts of a toolless design where you don't need tools to install your drives. I have here an optical drive that I'm going to easily install by sliding this lever back and then inserting the drive from the front of the computer, and then I simply plug it in to my motherboard using a cable. The hard drive is also easily installed by placing the mounting brackets on the sides of the hard drive. These brackets came with a case, and then you simply slide it into the bay and plug it into your motherboard. Out of all the equipment I've shown you, the graphics card was the most expensive, and I made sure I had enough power from my power supply to run it. It also needed to be installed in the slot closest to the CPU, and it took up 2 expansion slots as you are seeing here. Now the graphics card also required 2 6-pin PCI Express power connectors, and the card came with some adapters if I didn't have these connectors, but I did have them with my power supply. Simple overclocking has now become a very easy procedure. The manufacturers of equipment often provide software that will let you overclock your graphics card and monitor the fan speed and temperatures of it. You can also overclock your CPU through software provided with the motherboard, and you can monitor and change your fan speeds. That concludes the video. I hope you enjoyed it.